two.
Ran out of water.
No, that's all right. There it is.
Other than that,
All right, we ready?
This is amazing.
I'm going to hit the button. We are live at 6 o'clock.
All right, I will now call to order the Riverside City Council meeting for Thursday, July 18th, 2024 at 6 p.m. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Brown?
Here?
Mr. Denning?
Here.
Ms. Fry? Here. Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Ms. Lomach? Mr. Maxfield?
Present.
Mayor Williams?
Here.
Move to excuse. Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Joseph and a second from the Deputy Mayor to excuse absent council members. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Mr. Manager, any additions or corrections to the agenda as presented?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just one addition. We have one more resolution, 24-R-2965, which is a resolution that authorizes us to enter into a preliminary agreement with ODOT for the Woodman Phase 1 project. That's the portion just north of 35 up to Eastman, which we expect to sell early next year. This is housekeeping. We do this resolution, and then once estimates are finalized, I'll have another one for you later on in the year.
Move to
approve as amended.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Joseph and a second from the very quick Mr. Brown to approve the agenda, amended agenda as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Would you all please join me to rise and pledge allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We've all had a chance to review the meeting minutes from our June 13th work session and June 20th council meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Denning and a second from the Deputy Mayor to approve the minutes as published. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We will accept citizen petitions for this evening's meeting. There are no guests currently with us in council chambers, but if anyone arrives and would like to comment on any non-agenda items or agenda items, they can fill out a slip in the back. I almost left off agenda items because that's the next thing on our agenda. Madam Clerk, I'm assuming that there are no slips turned in for comment on agenda items.
That is correct, Mayor.
Then we move on to unfinished business, of which we have one ordinance. Mr. Manager, can you give us a brief synopsis?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The only ordinance tonight is a second reading for supplemental appropriations, as we discussed, I think, at the work session and then at the regular meeting where we had the first reading. There were no corrections or additions to that ordinance at this time, so we recommend approval.
Move to approve. Second.
Okay. The Riverside City Council or Riverside City Charter allows for the reading of an ordinance by title only unless a council member requests otherwise. Madam Clerk, would you please read this ordinance by title only?
Ordinance number 240852, an ordinance to make supplemental appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Riverside, State of Ohio, for the period January 1 through December 31, 2024.
Thank you. I'll now open the public hearing for ordinance 24-0-852 at 6:04 p.m. If anyone would like to speak on this ordinance, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Hearing no one and seeing no one come forward, I will close the public hearing for ordinance 24-0-852 at 6:04 p.m. Do we have any further discussions from members of council? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Denning?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Maxfield?
Yes.
Mayor Williams?
Yes. Motion carries. On to new business, of which we have 7 resolutions. The first one, Resolution 24-R-2959. Mr. Manager.
This is a resolution that adjusts the clerk of council's pay pursuant to earlier discussions by council.
This clerk?
That clerk
This-
indeed,
okay,
the very
that
same,
very clerk,
the very
okay.
talented,
Not-
the wondrous. Should I keep going?
No,
that-
you're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think Mr. Denning had a motion.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Denning and a second from the Deputy Mayor. All those in favor of Resolution 24-R-2959 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. The second resolution, Mr. Manager.
The second resolution declares various IT products and equipment that we have as surplus. This allows us to clean some closets out before we replace computers as budgeted for the year.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Denning and a second from Mr. Joseph. All those in favor of Resolution 24-R-2960 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Our third resolution, Mr. Manager.
Third resolution authorizes me to accept a grant from Flock that offsets the cost of the annual flock camera costs each year.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion for Mr. Denning and a second for Mr. Brown. All those in favor of Resolution 24-R-2961 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Our fourth resolution, Mr. Manager.
Fourth resolution concerns the police property tax levy, or the proposed police property tax levy. We have prepared two resolutions for you this evening. As discussed previously, I believe at the work session, we kind of ran over some numbers as far as the differences between a renewal and replacement. I'm happy to go over those here again really briefly with you all. And then this is sort of building on a conversation that we've had, I believe it was June 13th at the work session, that Mr. Braun from the Shared Resource Center also shared some information about forecasting with us and what the impacts of renewal versus replacement are on our budget, or no levy at all. But just to dive into this real briefly, I'll kind of cover the basics here. What I'll share on the screen for folks at home, this is, in case people weren't able to download the packet, this is the cover sheet to this week's, this agenda item in this week's packet. And I just want to briefly cover a couple of basics for everyone. So the police department budget this year is about $5.1 million in expenses. And that $5.1 million is what is required for us to offer the current level of service, meaning about 34 sworn positions. That includes 4 detectives, the command staff, and everybody that's on patrol, as well as records and other support staff. All the personnel and salary costs associated with that, as well as other contracts that we carry, supplies, the whole 9 yards. So the department's funding sources come primarily from income tax, and that's the $2.8 million. The general fund already gives the police department almost $900,000, and then the remainder comes from property taxes. It's about $1.2 million today. That $1.2 million comes from a 4.95 mil levy that the community originally passed back in 2009 and has been renewed since then, successively in 5-year terms. So the challenge that we're up against today is that the levy will roll off, and if the community elects not to pass a new levy, that would put an additional $1.2 million hole into the police department's budget. So the general fund would have to pay not $900,000, but closer to $2.1 million in order to keep the current level of service in police. So the question is, the November election is basically one of the last opportunities, or the last opportunity we have to go to the community to ask for this funding support before that would roll off of the books as a revenue source for the department. As we discussed back in June, it's possible for us to float that hole for a little while, maybe 2 years. After that, things get very, very, very tight, and we would not be able to maintain our current level of service across all functions longer than probably 2 years before we'd be knocking on the door of the auditor or making some very difficult decisions about what services to provide as a community. So the reason we're before you today is that, assuming that you would like to put this on the ballot to replace or renew that levy, I wanted to briefly cover the differences between those options for you this evening. So the first option is to simply renew the levy. And a levy renewal means that the millage stays the same, 4.95 mils, and it would continue to generate about $1.2 million per year. In other words, it sort of keeps the current funding stream steady and the status quo steady as far as that money coming into the department. It would not capture any additional value from recent revaluations that the county has gone through.
But it would capture new building.
Correct.
Okay. We haven't had a ton of that, but not nothing.
Correct, yes. And incidentally, part of the reason, I know property taxes are a bit hairy in all states, but here, especially in Ohio, even though that mill was passed as a 4.95 mill levy, the effective rate, if you go pull your property tax bill and you look at the effective rate, is much lower than that. It's, I believe, 2 mills and change off the top of my head. But the reason for that is because in Ohio, when you pass a property tax levy like this, it generates a certain amount of revenue, and the state law is structured so that really what we're trying to do is capture that dollar amount of revenue every year. So the county artificially lowers the millage rate in order to ensure that we just keep getting $1.2 million, right? So it helps to smooth out any valuations or any fluctuations in property valuations. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds.
No, that's a good explanation. I mean, that's
But-
good to know, though.
Right. So just so folks know, under a renewal, the reason why the dollar amount stays the same is because that's the county holding the dollar amount there by adjusting that effective millage rate. So for a property that's valued at around $100,000, the cost of the renewal, so in other words, the cost that folks are paying currently for police services, is about $92 per $100,000 in valuation per year, as under the renewal option. So just a quick example of a pie chart here, if I can find my keyboard. The way that breaks out under renewal is that this pie chart adds up to that 5.1 million that we've discussed. This would be money coming into the department that offsets those costs. So again, most of the department's money comes from income tax, and then the general fund subsidizes the department by about $900,000 a year. It would be the 1.2 million in property tax. And then we do get a few $100,000 a year in miscellaneous revenues. Those could be things like the flock camera grant or other one-off body armor grants, those sorts of things. But it is not a meaningful source of revenue that would sustain the department for a long term. In other words, what I'm saying is there's not a good way of increasing the yellow slice of this pie to help pay for more of the department's operations. A lot of the grants that are out there are for one-time things, body armor cameras, et cetera. So really what we're paying attention to today is this gray slice. Under a replacement levy, the millage rate would stay the same, 4.95 mils, but that would be applied against the new valuations that the county just issued as well as new construction. So what that does, and I believe Mr. Braun spoke to this when he was here back in June, is that effectively increases the amount of money that we would be generating every year from the police property tax levy. So that gray pie slice would go from 1.2 million up to about 1.9. And the difference between these charts really is that the amount of money that the general fund would have to give to the police department in order to keep all things equal goes down. So it frees up more money in the general fund that can go to other places and other priorities in next year's budget and in budgets following. The trade-off, of course, is that money doesn't just come out of thin air. It's based on the new valuations. And at $100,000 per valuation, a replacement would cost about $81 per year more than the renewal levy. So the increase in costs on property taxes would be about $7 a month. The annual cost up here would be $173 per $100,000 evaluation, compared to the simple renewal, which was 92. if I'm
And
not
most folks are
mistaken.
paying that already.
Correct. So when we think about what is really the difference between renewal versus replacement, the difference is that $81 per year per $100,000 evaluation. And what that $81 per year per 100,000 generates for us is several $100,000 more dollars that would free up money in our general fund, if that makes sense. So what we've prepared for you this evening is resolutions for both of these options. And once we're through discussion, we would look for a motion. I believe Mr. Miller's prepared some language that you can use. But I want to leave this, though, with a couple of points. The first is, if anyone out there has not yet watched the work session from June 13th, I would encourage people to do that, in part because one of the messages that we've been able to deliver this year, that I feel pretty proud about, actually, is that we've spent the last, if you think back 3 years ago, when we really didn't even have a budget, and now we've got one of those, and it's online, and anybody can go find it, and I'm happy to give anybody a copy if they want. We have a budget. We have a much firmer sense of where the numbers are coming from, where money's coming from, where money's going, and for the first time in at least my recent memory, we're able to say with some certainty exactly how much each department costs. So that's where this $5.1 million in police costs comes from.
Just to clarify, we had a budget, it just was not accessible.
I'm sorry, yes, you're right. What I mean when I say that is the sort of the popular
Yeah.
readable PDF booklet. Thank you, though. Excellent point. I don't want people to think we were operating without a budget. That's 100% true. Thank
It is
you.
the wild, wild
Yeah,
west.
yeah, a little too wild, yeah. So yes, in terms of a popular budget book that folks can read, we have one of those now, and we're able to summarize those costs based on a department by department. What that's given us, though, also is a foundation from which we can make really educated financial forecasts. And we asked the Shared Resource Center to come in and help do that for us. And I think one of the key takeaways that we heard, or that I heard, was that sort of regardless of which option goes on the ballot, should the community approve it, at some point down the line, and that could be 7, 10, 12 years from now, we will again encounter a situation where we are likely to need more revenue. And I only say that because I want folks to know that we're not trying to hide anything in terms of this discussion, and that we are trying to I'm trying to give you the information you need to make an informed decision based on where we are today, what we're potentially looking at in the future. But also, just the other thing to remember about all that is that a financial forecast is a forecast. And forecasts change, and the farther out you go, the fuzzier, because nobody knows what the world's going to look like in 10 years. And so it's just something else to consider as we're having this conversation and trying to think through this problem. But the main idea is that I'm also trying to be sure that you all don't feel like it's necessarily renewal or replacement, and we have to go. It's the question is bigger than just that today. Sort of regardless of how you all feel, and how the community comes out to support either one of these questions, we will continue to pay attention to the revenue numbers, and in the out years, we may encounter a situation again where more revenue is necessary.
And in theory, if we do a renewal, we would probably have to go sooner compared to
Correct.
replacement, correct?
Correct, and that's really where I wanted to land, which is that I think for the purposes of your conversation tonight, one of the important things to bear in mind is that the question isn't, can we pass this and not have to ask the voters again? Because based on what we were seeing and what we heard, the revenue problems may still come up, or I want to say that. Additional revenue may be likely in future years. The question I think that you need to bear in mind this evening is, if the community supports a renewal, then we may need to look at revenue in the nearer future. If the community supports a replacement, we may have a little more time before revenue comes up again. But again, bearing in mind that we're talking forecasts. Forecasts are subject to change, just like the rest of the world, and it's just one of the
Well,
things.
the biggest thing I've got is, since 2009, the price of vehicles has gone quite a bit higher, and everything is getting more expensive, but what we passed then, we still only get. So if I still only got a $120 paycheck, I would be buying less and less. So to my point is, we need to reevaluate and, and increase the amount that's going in so that we don't have to do this again in a year or two, or go out and ask them again in a year or two for even more funding.
Yeah, this is about right around a quarter of the police budget, this levy. And the thing that I'm extremely cognizant of, and Mike, you're right, everything has gotten significantly more expensive. And I feel like nobody else, like our residents understand that, they feel that, we all feel that. And we're not the only ones going up for a levy this November. Mad River Local Schools is going to have something.
The
Dayton
county.
Metro Parks. the library. So there's four, that's what my preliminary count is, four different levies on the ballot.
Property tax increase proposals.
Yep, and our property tax just got increased. And I'm aware of what that looks like, and I'm aware that I want to be a good neighbor to the other organizations that we all utilize, the schools, the parks, the library. And, I mean, this is going to keep us where we're at. We already had this voted down back in May.
With not very good education about
Yeah.
that levy.
The
So
problem
let's
was
let's
that it
stress that.
wasn't- the-
There
the
was not very
biggest-
good education about
If
the
you
levy.
listen to people as they were coming out, it was
Not
more
necessarily from the city-
about the
city's
fact
perspective,
that they
but-
didn't know about it than it was what it was.
Right.
I mean, to
Which
me.
I think lessons were learned
Police
from that.
levies and fire levies are passed on a regular basis.
Well, let me let Zach finish his point.
No, I mean.
Because there's public safety levies that failed around the region that night, not just Riverside.
Right.
Right. And I mean, we're asking our residents for money. This is a hard thing to do because we wish we lived in a world where we didn't have to collect income tax, where we didn't have to have levies to fund our police department, but that's not the reality that we live in. And while asking people for money when times are tough is difficult, I'm just a little cautious of the messaging here, and where a renewal says, hey, look, you're not paying a dime more than what you're paying currently. Now, if you pass, like if it failed, then yeah, you're going to save about 25 cents a day, but your police department's going to
For
suffer.
significantly less.
For a diminished police department. So, I mean, that's what it breaks down to. The renewal breaks down to about 25 cents a day. And I feel like that message on itself, on its merit, I mean, I feel like that's a really easy message to pass, or to sell to our resident.
But a replacement is only, what'd you say, 82 cents a day? Or less?
$81 a year, or a little less than $7 a month.
Additional.
Additional.
In addition to what
Additional.
they're paying now. So it's $191 a year.
And there's nothing preventing us from coming back next year or the year after.
But that's the point. We don't want to keep going back because it's getting tougher and tougher
Exactly.
to pass levies and continually asking our community for money over and over and over again is extremely frustrating. And that's, I think, where a lot of the questions come from the community. Why do you keep asking us for money?
Just for clarification, the replacement is $173 per 100,000, and the difference there is that 81.
So it's about 47 cents a day.
And that's if we do a renewal.
Which is less than a cup of coffee or a Coke or anything else that we
Less
buy
than
on a regular
legal-
basis.
Anything you can buy in the
Yeah.
Right,
I
exactly.
don't think they sell anything that's that much anymore. Anyway, you were saying something, Jesse, go ahead.
The biggest thing is, I don't want to go for a renewal and then 3 years from now, we need more money. When
Or
the
even
community would
a
just say,
year-
you
a
just
year
had
from now.
you just had a levy on the, or who knows, 5 years from now, we might, or less than that, we might want to put a street levy back on, or something like that. We can't continue to keep asking for money.
And what if a replacement fails?
What if the renewal fails? I mean, we don't know.
We don't, but if I had to, in my gut, say, what's the safe play? The safe play is renewal and live to fight another day. I was as naively optimistic as anyone in the election we had in March, that, yeah, of course, it's public safety, it'll sail through the uprights. But 4 communities failed public safety levies that night. 1 passed, Xenia passed, we failed, Heber failed, Vandalia failed, Northmont, Inglewood failed. So I'm very torn on, do we just tell people, renew, no new taxes, and see if there's a few other things can break our way in the next year or two to build more momentum? Part of me worries that if we go replacement again, then we're telling the folks, like, we didn't listen to you at all. We didn't listen at all. Do you have something, Brenda?
Yes. I personally feel like the police department budget should be secure and not coming out of the general fund. So, when we brought the replacement levy forward, in the previous election, I felt I felt really good about it. I felt like that would help secure the police department budget for a long time. But the voters said no. And one thing I've learned sitting on this council is it really angers the voters if they tell you no and you come back and ask them for the exact same thing. We tried to pass a road levy. It failed by 4 votes. We thought it was only 4 votes. We could try again. And that angered the voters more than anything I've ever seen. And then we tried again. And it just got worse from there.
But I will tell you, I heard from several residents who said, I didn't know what I was voting for. I didn't know this was on the ballot. I had no idea what this was. So walking in when they were voting, a lot of people did not know what they were voting for.
When people see
Or
levy on the
against.
ballot, they immediately think tax increase. So they didn't think that a renewal would not mean a tax increase, and they didn't know that language, so that's why.
Well, we
my
asked for,
opinion-
we asked for a replacement
yeah.
in March.
I'm going to play devil's advocate just to kind of speak on both sides here. This is also a general election. Our general elections get significantly more turnout. And another thing that I think the board should consider is they're going to be faced with 4 options: schools, parks, libraries, police. And it's really going to be a question to everyone, all 7 of us and all 24,000 people in Riverside, or the 13,000 who can vote, that, like, what's your priorities? Like, where do you want to spend your property tax dollars? And, I mean, we did a good job on the income tax passing, and that was done, I believe, in a general election. So, I mean.
It was November.
2020?
Oh, I remember it very well.
Well, I
It
mean-
was November 21.
21.
21, yeah.
So maybe I was wrong there, but I mean, that is.
But it was in
something-
November, it was a November election.
Yeah, so that's another thing to consider too, is that people are going to come and vote with their priorities for what means most to them. I mean, we're really taking a judgment here on how we feel our residents would react to a police levy.
I will say in that election, it affected people who work here, who don't necessarily vote here. And I think that one would be hard for me to do apples to apples comparison.
Because a lot of people got money back.
Yeah.
60% of the people were netting out better because we gave back the credit.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Zach's not wrong, though. There was a effort there. There was information going out. There was things that we didn't do in March. And I honestly, I thought, as I said a minute ago, I thought that we were in a different place with the community on that. And I, take a lot of that blame because I probably should have been having conversations instead of assuming that everybody was on the same page. I think our community, generally speaking, is very supportive of law enforcement, very supportive of public safety. It was great to be at Coffee with Cops and Firefighters on Saturday and see folks coming up and saying hi, and how many people by name many of our officers knew just as friends, not because they're, I'm arresting you all the time, I know you. Hey, remember that guy? Yeah, no, it wasn't like that. But it was great to see that for a couple hours on Saturday. But I also think that if we take the step towards replacement, that there's work ahead for us, the 7 of us, without Sarah being here, up here being force advocates, force multipliers and advocates in our community, the different parts of the community that we each touch on the importance of this. Because if we go for replacement, I mean, we'd be going for all of it, we'd be really working hard no matter what, but I feel like there's like no tomorrow on some of this, not to speak in too grave of terms, because I know what this will do to the budget if we have nothing on January 1.
Yeah, and maybe now's a good time for me to just tack onto that really briefly. Sort of, as far as how I've been thinking through how to process this on the staff side. I think what I intend to do is however you vote this evening we will make an assumption in preparing the budget for next year that whatever you vote to place on the ballot is going to be supported by the community and will pass. We'll go through the rest of budget prep leading up to November, sort of with that in mind. And then depending on the outcome of the election, we can go sort of one of two ways. Obviously, if things pass, then great, we've already plugged these numbers into the budget, we keep rolling with them. Then if for some reason either one of these options should fail, then we have two options as far as how to handle the budget for next year. The easier option, if the levy were to fail, is basically to keep the budget, keep the assumptions in the budget, and then in lieu of property taxes, we would amend the budget ordinance to say that we would shift that revenue from property taxes to the general fund. So we would basically have a budget that would show effectively right away next year that we're going to start dipping into our reserves, our savings account, if you will, to help cover that shortfall. And then I would plan on, the governing body having conversations throughout next year, really, on what to do next and how quickly you may want to go back to the ballot. And at that point in time, we could also rerun some of the forecasts to really try to tamp down how much runway we actually have. So I don't want you to feel like, if for some reason it fails, I don't want to be misunderstood. That's a significant challenge. And it will take a lot of wind out of our sails in the general fund. Right now, we have about $4 million in fund balance. If I have to cover $2.1 million next year for the police department, that almost halves our reserves. And that's less money that we have to solve other problems like Right Point or other things that are hanging out there that we're trying to deal with. Having said that, we can develop a process to think through and tackle those should something fail at the ballot. It's just that we can't do that for more than a couple of years before we really have to make some hard decisions.
And what happens if neither one of these, what other option does not pass in November? We can't go for a renewal then, right? We have to go for a whole new.
Then,
Correct. At that point, it is a brand-new levy.
Everything would be new money at that point.
Yep.
Yes.
Just for reference, guys, I was on the Board of Elections website. The March 2024 election, where we did not prevail, there was 2,408 votes cast. The November 2020 presidential election, there were 10,106 votes cast in Riverside. So that's 4 times the number of people voting. You can imagine why. It's a November election, it's presidential year. So if there's 4 times as many people voting, I would imagine this will be a pretty engaged electorate this November. Are there more yes votes out there that didn't show up in March? Is really
Well, I think
Well, we
the
have to-
biggest thing is,
what we don't know.
we get the information out there ahead so that people know it's even there. I
Right.
think the biggest
Yeah.
problem that I heard, and I believe Jesse's saying the same thing, is that people just didn't know it was there. And so when they saw it,
Yeah.
they go, oh, they're trying to sneak something through, and so they just voted no, just out of principle. But
Right.
we would have been out there and they would have been educated and the information would have been more upfront, I think we could have passed it in March.
We have a compelling story.
Yes,
Like,
absolutely.
Look what we are able to do with the resources that we have, as limited as they are. Like having a school resource officer, doing National Night Out every year, being out in the community.
Flock cameras.
Flock cameras. I feel immensely proud of the police department that we have. And it's a product that I'm very confident of selling.
Well, and now more than ever, public safety is,
Existentially important.
so.
At the end of the day, it's a financial decision.
Mhm.
And people can be very supportive of the service that the money goes toward and still feel that they cannot afford to increase their taxes. That should not be lost in the conversation.
No, I understand that.
But
But I think part of the point too is the way Ohio does it, is that they actually were paying more taxes back in value-wise.
Right.
More
At the
out of their
beginning.
paycheck was going toward taxes in 2009 than what's going now. Yes, it may be a different dollar figure, but it's not really any different value.
Yeah, I just worry about how easy or hard that is to explain
Yeah.
if you're
No,
running into somebody at the
and
gas
I
station, running
understand
into
that.
somebody at church, or
And
running
I
into somebody at
understand that.
Kroger's.
You know,
Yeah.
they're going to look at it as, oh, well, you know, it's going to cost me extra 75 cents a day.
Or
whatever
just
the
they want
answer
more
is.
money.
Yeah.
And sometimes unfortunately, that's the guttural reaction that many folks might have. We've been we as a council, I'm recalling we had folks from Sinclair in here, it was a year and a half ago maybe, and they had a renewal up, and we were all very supportive, and I'll just tip my hand. We have the Dayton Metro Library will come to one of our August meetings and talk about their levy. They're asking for 1 mil. Metro Parks, I have not heard from anybody from Metro Parks. They've not reached out to me yet, but I know the library would like to come in and at least talk about the services they offer our community. And you guys have heard me talk about it before, I'm a huge fan of the library, the Burkhart Library especially. The children's librarian there is wonderful, and we take full advantage. I don't know, I can look up how much I pay every year towards the library. I know that we get our money's worth. But to Brenda's point, this is going to be a financial decision for many folks. And I would just say whatever vote we take, I want us to be willing to do work to educate the community from this moment to November 5th.
What's our deadline to pass this? Today?
Today.
That's why we took July 11th off, so. Andy, what do you think? You're not saying anything. Come on, man. I'm just kidding. I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to talk, and I'm just kidding around, but.
I just think that with, honestly, I mean, Zach made a good point about, the voters are going to be presented 4 different levies this coming November. I mean, that's a lot of money out of a lot of people's pockets. So, I mean, how much can you stretch people before they start, saying, I'm not going to do that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know, I keep going back and forth in my head too. This is deliberation at its finest because I'm like, I'm on the fence, really. And one thing I'm thinking now is if we pass a renewal, if we pass a replacement, we're still out of money in 10 years, right? Like the modeling that we've seen, we're still not out of the woods because we're still supplementing
Yeah.
money to the police department, even if we pass a replacement. So there's a much larger conversation to be had about the overall financial stability of the city. And that conversation has to happen regardless of whether or not either one of these levies passes. The timing on that conversation is highly dependent on either one of these passing. You pretty much have 3 options here. We're going to have this really tough conversation next year if neither of these pass. We're going to have it in a few years if the renewal passes. And then maybe in a decade we'll be having the conversation if the replacement passes.
But it's a far easier conversation in a decade to say, we've been conservative with our money, we've been, we've handled our money better financially, things like
Yeah,
that.
we're on a good path.
We're on
We
a
need
good
to-
path. Then in 3 years from now, we just had renewal.
We're not going to make it a decade. We don't have a revenue source to
Yeah.
pay for our roads.
The tough conversation should have happened 29 years ago when the
But we
city
can't
was
go back.
bashed.
We can't go
So,
back.
we're
Yeah.
kicking the can down the road one way or another. And, I think I've kind of set that if we can pass a renewal, we can make a yard sign that says, won't raise your taxes.
Yes, I agree.
It's a 25 cents a day, and then we have we just got a couple weeks ago, financial models about what our long-term outlook is for a city and our finances. And then we can come, take a deep breath and have the tough conversation a few years from now.
I think a few years also might give us an opportunity for other things that are working in our favor now to move more in our favor and show more progress. I'm very, very, very cognizant of think about all of it, it's overwhelming. The need for our roads, the need for our schools, the need for our public safety. And not always in that order, but speaking with someone a few days ago at a ribbon cutting for a new business that's expanding on Springfield Street, I was talking about the the amount of private investment that we've been able to leverage in the time that the group of us have been together for the most part, the last 4 or 5 years now, that's occurred on our major thoroughfares, that hasn't happened, this happened without us as a city giving away tax dollars. We're not taking the city's revenue and paying a company to move here. Companies are moving here. People are investing here. Millions, conservatively, $40 to $50 million has been spent of private dollars between 35 and Springfield Street on Harshman Woodman. And I keep wanting to get to the point where I feel more than confident to say to a citizen, to say to anybody, to say to my own wife, to say to my neighbor Bobby, to say to my mother, who all pay taxes in Riverside on property and income, that these investments are being made by others. Let's invest in ourselves. This is an investment in ourselves, but I've also been around long enough to know, to Brenda's point, that when the voters speak here, they want to be heard. And that's where I keep falling short on just pushing through to a replacement, is that I fear that is something that, even with all the education in the world, we might still, on principle, run up against that trend that we've seen. Because I remember the road vote that was 4 votes short, thinking like, oh, that might come out in a recount. And then it was still that close, and then the next one was 80 votes, and then the one after that was 200 votes short. So it kept swinging the wrong way. This is deliberation at its best, Zach, because I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I make a motion to adopt resolution number 24R-2962, declaring it necessary to levy a tax in the excess of 10 million limitations by placing a 5-year renewal ballot question for the purpose of providing and maintaining motor vehicles, communication, and other equipment used directly in operation of the police department, or the payments of salaries of permanent police personnel to the electorate on November 5th, 2024.
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Zach and a second from Brenda. Any further discussion?
Okay. If this goes 3-3, it fails, and then do we automatically get the replacement levy? Or do we have, then we have to vote on that one?
No, we'll be here all night then. I mean, I say that jokingly, but not really jokingly. Like, we have to come with a decision. Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, there's an opportunity for emergency meeting between now and August 1.
Yes, we could have.
I don't know that August 1 is the cutoff, but I know it's right around the cutoff.
We could call a special meeting next week.
You know I will be gone.
Yeah.
So someone else would have to take care of this with the Board of Elections.
Right. But yes, it's feasible, yes.
I don't even know.
But if you were to go 3-3, and I might look at Mr. Miller here too, then really what happens is it would fail. You could consider the next one, or somebody that voted for or against it could bring it back.
Or
Somebody that voted
Against
Against
Against it.
Can bring it back.
Could bring it back, right. So if somebody changes their mind,
Yeah.
then you could bring it back.
Okay, well,
is it someone on the winning side of a resolution?
Yes.
Or-
Well, Councilmember, if a motion is made, as you just made, and seconded, and say the vote is 3-3, so the motion does not carry, none of the yay votes on the motion that was made can rebring
Okay.
that motion. So an opponent of that motion could rebring that motion. I'm
Okay.
sorry, could bring that motion, basically, as Mr. Manager said, change their mind from their nay vote. But a proponent of a failed motion may not bring it back at the same session.
Okay. I'd like to call for the ayes and nays.
yeah, voice, or
You want a roll
roll
call
call
vote?
vote.
Are we ready for that?
Is there any further discussion before we call the question? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Ms. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Denning?
No.
Mr. Maxfield?
Yes.
Mayor Williams?
Yes. All right, we have 3 more resolutions. I don't know that the next one's going to take as much time to talk about, but I'll let Josh
I
brief us
would-
anyway.
I would imagine not. I actually can do the next two in one briefing. So these.
Well, slow down.
I know, right? 2963 and 2964 are both resolutions of necessity. These are required before we bring you an ordinance to put assessments on property tax bills. These assessments are specifically for street lighting and nuisance abatement procedures. So it's a housekeeping thing. We just ask for approval for these this evening, and then at the next meeting, we'll bring you the ordinances with the specific amounts for each property for each one of those assessments.
Move to approve 24R-2963 and 2964.
Second.
We have a motion for Mr. Joseph and a second for Mr. Denning to approve resolutions 24R-2963 and 24R-2964. Any discussion among members of council? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. And the final resolution, Mr. Manager.
The final resolution is what I got carried away with at the beginning of the meeting and already briefed you on, but this is preliminary legislation for ODOT for Woodman Phase 1, and I'll be before you in a couple of months with the final version.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Joseph and a second from Mr. Denning. All those in favor of Resolution 24-R-2965 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Madam Clerk, there have been no slips turned in to comment on non-agenda items by the public?
No.
None. All right. On to the city manager's report, which is always brief.
It is brief, and actually, I just want to say
Sounds
that-
great, okay.
Great.
Good
We're done
update.
here.
They're getting better.
Actually, I was just going to compliment you all, honestly. It is, I don't take for granted the gravity of the kinds of discussion that you all just had. I certainly know what it's like on this side of the fence. I can imagine what it's like on that side of the fence and how difficult these things are to weigh and deliberate. I will say that I tell other people this, I've told you this before, I'll say it again. You're a great group of people to work with precisely because of the way that you have these conversations and you have them productively and cordially, and we talk it out and we get to decisions and we move. And I am thrilled every time I can go tell one of my colleagues, oh yeah, we talk it out and we all pull in the same direction at the end of the day and we go on to the next thing. So just thank you, because it is tremendous wind in our sails, even just internally for the staff to know that the governing body has this level of rapport and decorum, and we get clear direction on what to do next. So we're behind you all the way, and we'll get whatever we need together to help the education campaign and to roll the pieces of this out that need to go out. And as always, we're here for you when you need us. Thank you.
All right. Any questions for the city manager on his report? Moving along. We are on to council member comments, and I will start with Mr. Brown.
Wholeheartedly agree with the police levy renewal. I have two neighbors, well, a neighbor that's a couple that unfortunately couldn't be here this evening, but they were, I spoke to them about it, and they were wholeheartedly in support of whichever one we came up with. So they'll be, I'll relay this information to them, and I just wanted to say that they're pleased with the work that they do, the police department does, and fully support them in their endeavors. So we appreciate them as well as our fire department. I've spoke with Chief Robinson on multiple occasions about certain things, and he's always been certain to get back with me in a very quick, timely manner, and I appreciate him. And yeah, so definitely.
Mr. Joseph?
And to third that point with the seven of us, I think if you look at what we just discussed, at the core of it, it's we're talking about the city as a whole, right? And how much we care and what the best thing to do to ensure the financial stability of our police department and our city. It's not whether or not we support the police or that, like, we support the city. It's all of us we're coming to the same place at the end of the day. And this isn't a glamorous job. Our YouTube videos get what, about 100 views, 50 views. So it's not for the notoriety. It's not for the, well, currently $333 a month that we get. Every single one of us does this job because we care about the city. And I can honestly say I feel that in all 6 of my colleagues. That we come to work, we come here 3 times a month, we respond to emails, we go to city events, and we do it because we care. And being able to be in a board with 6 like-minded people who all get along is really refreshing, because we know for a fact, if we go watch a bunch of other council meetings, we are lucky with what we have with this group. So, and we have a fantastic people flanking us on either ends to keep this body in line. So thank you all, and our new law director. So that's all I have.
I had the opportunity, as I mentioned a moment ago, to be at a business expansion groundbreaking that is on Springfield Street, and it was, and I'll go more into this later when the company MSD is closer to their completion with the kudos, but they were open and glowing in their praise of our staff, and it was something that they didn't do it because I was standing there. They knew our planning staff, Naya, Lori, our economic development staff by first name, and it was so refreshing and gratifying to hear how well the business community and people in the real estate community, people in the building community that want to get things done in Riverside, investing millions of dollars of private money into our community, raising property values, improving streetscapes, giving employment opportunities, that they have a high level of confidence in our staff to help them get done what they want to get done. And we don't cut corners. We don't make it any harder, or we don't make it any easier, but people feel great because we're consistent. And I've said before, when we've talked about other economic development opportunities in the time I've been mayor, that companies are not looking for a tax break. They're not looking for this zoning, that zoning. They're looking for consistency. And if they know that they can consistently rely on a city government, city staff to be reactive a certain way, to be responsive in a certain way, to be fair in a certain way, they have a high level of confidence in putting their capital behind those projects. So it was phenomenal for me to be able to hear them talk about Nye and Lori unprompted. And I'll make sure that they know how much they're appreciated, not just by us, but by them. And then the second thing I'll say, Zach said we're lucky, and I say we certainly are. I was, like many of us, I was at home Saturday night when everything kind of went sideways nationally with what happened in Pennsylvania, and we happened to have friends over, and I couldn't help but talk about people that I serve on city council with. I said, I'm so lucky that by charter, our roles are nonpartisan, not because I want an R next to my name or a D next to my name or whatever, but the very nature of how we govern is not in service to a party. It is in service to the citizens. And I openly say quite a bit, Zach and I don't have many political things that we agree on, but we text all the time. We're good friends. I value his judgment. I value his friendship. Brenda and I don't have a whole lot of things we might politically agree with all the time, but Brenda is somebody who I tremendously rely on for her value judgments. The same thing with April. And I didn't just name the 3 Democrats on purpose. But it strikes me when I look at the national scene and I think, like, man, we get along. It's not hard to just see someone they have a passion for what they're doing. They have a passion for the place we are, making it better. They might zig or I zag. They might think this or I think that. But when you come to a place with good faith, and I do feel we're lucky because all of us come to our conversations in good faith. And I did not know how we were going to vote tonight. I really didn't know what the temperature was on these issues, but to echo Josh's sentiments, I'm glad we could have these discussions. And I thank all of you for coming to these conversations in a place of good faith, that you'll be heard, that you'll be valued, and even if we don't agree on which way we might have voted one night, we all know that we're all heading in the right direction. The road might be bumpy at times, but I feel very lucky to serve with the 6 of you for that very reason. And I do want to say I was so glad to see in the moment on Saturday and Sunday that every politician, regardless of their party affiliation, was saying the same thing, that we need to lower the temperature and we need to start having conversations. And I don't have to stress about Thursday nights and having conversations that end in anger. They might not end the way exactly I wanted them to, but I know that we get to them by these deliberations.
I appreciate you saying that, Pete. And you said that we might not have a lot of things politically that we agree on. I disagree to that. I think
Yeah,
we
you're
do.
probably right. You're
I think
probably
we
right.
do. Because
More than we think. Because we
because-
have conversations.
Right, because we're civil and we're able to talk without yelling at each other, right? And I think that's more introspective of our community and our country as a whole. Mike, you and I talk, Jesse, you and I talk, Pete, you and I talk. We haven't had national political conversations yet, but I'm sure we'll get there. But we agree on 99.9% of the things we talk about. Even if it's a hot button issue, we all kind of see at the same level. And I feel like if you polled people and you took the party and you took the donkey and the elephant, or the donkey and the elephant out of the conversation, we all can agree.
Yeah, take the labels away.
Right, and especially when we talk about the best way to run a city, like police departments, fire departments, roads, the services that we provide are not partisan. I don't care, like, our road is not painted red or blue. The police department and fire department
It's not
are,
pro
but-
Second Amendment, it's not anti-Second Amendment, it just wants to be a road.
So it's a very refreshing place. It's an escape. There's no CNN, there's no Fox News being broadcasted here, and it is a refreshing reprieve from what we see outside of these chambers. So yeah, we do, I think, Pete, we've had these conversations
Yeah.
before, and I think we pretty much would see eye to eye.
But folks would say, well, wait a minute, but Pete, you're a Republican and Zach's a Democrat. How can you guys even sit next to each other? I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
It's good to have those discussions, but
We don't have super PACs funding our council campaign.
yet. So I genuinely, though, I'm very thankful, and the folks that were visiting with us on Saturday night, they were, doesn't this worry you? I said, it worries me nationally, but like, I don't worry about the folks that I serve with because I know because we talk. We don't close off with labels. And that's one thing I am very thankful for when the city charter was written, that these elections are nonpartisan. And when I first ran, people asked me, what, are you this or that? And I said, I can answer the question, or you can look it up on your own. But nothing is going to help get that road paved or the shopping center filled again based on if you know what my stance is on Afghanistan. So, and they usually like, okay, that makes sense. But I'm genuinely thankful for the opportunity that we have here, and I think the discussion we just had was a good example of that. So, on to the Deputy Mayor, Mr. Maxfield.
Kumbaya. No.
No.
Again, obviously what everybody says, yes, it's great. You know, I'm not the best speaker in the world and all that, but you guys know that. But I will say, because I've been guilty of it, we've all been guilty of it. A lot of times, we want to go back and talk about what's happened 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. We've got to stop doing that. And to quote the singer Jelly Roll, right, the windshield is a lot bigger than the rearview mirror, right? Because our windshield is very bright. We have a lot of things going for us. But we cannot continue to go back and blame what's happened 10, 15, 20 years ago and think that we're going to continue to grow. We have to just keep moving forward because we do have a bright future ahead of us. And we do have a great council. We have a great staff. We have a great police department, public safety. So we've got to keep moving forward and keep with that looking forward in that windshield, because if we keep going back and looking backwards, it's going to keep holding us up and holding us back. So I'm going to try to do better with not looking back at what's happened in the past, because I really think every time we bring that up, there's one more thing that we can blame something else on. Let's keep moving forward because we're doing some really great things.
Well said. Ms. Fry?
So like many others, Saturday's assassination attempt really affected me. It's not something that we ever want to see in our country. And it's happened before, and it's happened with worse results. And regardless of what, where we fall politically, it was a bad day for all of us. I've been trying to process it, and the thing I come back to is along the lines of what you were saying, Mayor. When we work together, we can bust down those barriers. And I found a lot of fulfillment in participating in the process in my community. In this role, even in other civic roles, showing up is probably the most significant thing that has helped me feel like I have hope for the future, you know? When we're cloistered in our own homes and we're not engaging with people in person, we don't know our neighbors, it's very easy to become fearful and angry. When we walk out of our homes and we come and engage in civic endeavors and make friends with our neighbors, that's where we feel like we actually have power to make things better. And I would just leave you with that thought and just really encourage people to think about how they can affect the temperature themselves. Oh, well, it's a couple weeks away, but yeah, I'll announce it.
Before next month.
No, we have one more
Oh, do we?
meeting.
Okay, never mind, sorry.
All right, you're done, Brenda. Sorry. We still got too much time.
The next
I thought it
blood
was
drive,
before- or
the
next
next
week,
blood drive is August 5th in the parking lot. If you would like to register to donate, summertime is always a challenge to fill our spots and get enough blood for the need in the area hospitals. The place to donate is donortime.com. Search for the City of Riverside.
All right.
And don't get hurt the day before, or they won't let you.
Protect your precious skin.
Or wear gloves.
And Mr. Denning.
Yeah, last time I was planning to donate, and I got there and I had stitches, so they wouldn't let me donate, so, but I'll be in there this time. Couple things. The lights are on Beatrice. Thank you, Josh. I just wish that AES and Miami Valley Lighting would work as well together as this council.
I'll pass that along.
Because they started working on that in February, because we actually started on this over a year ago.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the issues are. I'm just hoping that we don't have those type of issues in the future. The international night was Tuesday night at the Taco
Velos.
Velos. It was awesome.
It's very good.
They did an awesome job, and everything worked out well. And I just want to say that you guys, I've worked through. I'm going to go with a little bit of history, but it's okay. I've sat on multiple councils with people, and this by far is the best teamwork that we've had over the years. And so take that as a compliment to all of us for working together. And yes, we don't always have to vote the same way, but once we go out of here, then that decision is made and we move on. And I think that, I just wish Congress could do the same thing. I wish they could meet in the middle and make a decision instead of this side and that side, and they only vote no because that side brought it up. That's ridiculous. But the good part is that I've always said that local government is where each individual in the community can have the most impact on their community. And that's what we need to work for, and that's what we need to work towards. I don't want to owe a PAC for something, they gave me money to get elected and now they want to make a deal. That's not the way I work. But anyway, it's great working with all y'all. That's it.
And thank you, AES. You guys were very busy over the weekend, but got the power back on, and
Yes.
we
Yes,
thank you.
thank you for that.
Thank you for that. With nothing else, I will adjourn the meeting at 7:05. We are adjourned.